Hi there, today we're going to be looking at the first paragraph in a piece of creative writing, which is the paragraph which we call the drop paragraph. And it's usually the first thing that you write in a piece of creative writing. It needs to really show how good your description is, how good you are at writing creatively. So it's a really important one to try and get right and to get some good description into. Okay. Today I'm going to be using this kind of paradise beach scene and imagining that this is my question, this is the thing that I need to do a task on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk you through some tips for the piece, for the drop paragraph, the types of things you should be including, and then I'm going to write an example paragraph for this picture so you can see how it will look. What we'll do to begin with is just write the tips down. So if you can just write these in your notes, that would help. So we'll call them top tips for the drop. Don't know why I've used capital letter here, that should be lowercase. Right. Okay. Let's just make it a little bit closer. Right. In your drop paragraph, okay, you should be focusing on really creating detailed imagery for your reader, who is going to be an examiner, but you kind of need to forget about that and think about the opening of a really good book and what should be in that opening if you're going to create a setting. So the first tip that was given in the previous video is try to cover the senses. What often happens in this paragraph is that people always focus on what they can see and they don't think about everything else within the picture. So sound, you should always be doing some sort of sound. Even if the place is silent, then you're going to describe the silence, because there's different types of silence. Silence can be quite sinister, but it can also be peaceful and calm. You're going to look at definitely using what we call figurative language. So that means things like metaphors, similes, personification. You definitely want to be including those types of language devices. A couple of other things to think about is you want to try to really focus on your certain choice with two types of words, and they are your adjectives and your verbs. There's a real difference between, for example, strolling somewhere, marching somewhere, and striding somewhere or wandering somewhere. And all those verbs are to do with movement and the same kind of speed of movement, but they tell you very different things. So you have to be really careful about the exact word choice that you have. Another thing, and this is just a tip that always happens when people do their drop paragraph, is they use colours. So they describe the colour of various things because they're trying to do the kind of what they can see. Now, try and avoid using simple colours, and what I mean by that is don't just say the sand was yellow. Okay, be specific about the type of yellow. So is it like a buttercup yellow? Is it a fluorescent yellow? Is it a lemon yellow, an amber kind of yellow? There's lots of different shades. Well, there's lots of different colours to begin with, and then you want to think about your shades. So bright, dark, fluorescent, faded. There's lots of different ways to describe colour, so think really carefully about that. But you definitely want to include the colour, but you're going to be careful about how you describe it. Another good thing to think of, a really good tip that I think is the best thing, is you just have to pretend that they can't see the picture. Okay, so you're kind of describing a setting to someone as if they can't see it. That doesn't mean it's a riddle. It's not like they have to guess where you are. They should be able to know where you are pretty quickly. But what you're doing is you're creating in their head the image of what you can see. Now remember, as was said in the last video, the picture is only inspiration, okay? So it doesn't have to be exactly what's going on here. So for example, I might want an empty sky. I might not have any clouds in it. I might have more palm trees. I might change something that's going on in the picture. It might not be sunny, I can make it a storm. The picture is only inspiration. Today I'm gonna mainly use this picture just to kind of help you create that paragraph. But you almost need to kind of think that they can't see it and you're creating that picture for them, every part of it, okay? So we're gonna go into the model paragraph now. So just do yourself a little subheading there. Okay. I'm going to start by just atmosphere. So I think this would be a really peaceful setting. I think it would be quite calm, quite relaxing. A good word for relaxing is tranquil. So I'm going to start with a list of 3 adjectives. And to really slow down how the reader reads them, I'm going to write them as single words with full stops. Now, it's not technically grammatically correct, although we would call it a fragment sentence, but it's quite a nice way to start a piece of creative writing. So I'm going to go for tranquil, peaceful, calm, just like that. Now, I'm going to go straight into sound because I've mentioned how calm it is. So I would imagine that the sounds within this picture, if I can kind of place myself there, is there's not going to be a great deal of wind. I want it to be quite empty, not many people. I think that becomes more peaceful, more of a paradise if you kind of feel like you're the only person there. I think the only sound you would probably hear is the kind of lapping of the water reaching the shore. So that's what I'm going to go with. We'll go for silence. Actually, let's not start with silence. Let's go for the only sound is the gentle splashing of, I don't know if splashing is maybe too much of a harsh sound, but I don't really know if there's another word for it. Maybe lapping, gentle lapping of water. No, I'm going to say it's splashing of waves as they reach the shore. So straight away within that second, well, I guess those are mini sentences, aren't they? But within that kind of second description, I think it's obvious to the reader where I am. That's what I want it to be like. But they know this isn't like a stormy beach. This isn't a seaside, a busy seaside with loads of people making noise. The water's not very active. So straight away I've started to create that picture just through the sound. I'm going to move on now to what I can see. I'm going to talk about these blues because what I feel like is like that's the edge of the sea, but you can hardly see it because there's almost like a blurred boundary between the water and the sky itself. And what you've got is kind of shades of blue. Yeah, so I'm gonna start with a description of that. So shades of rather than blue, I'm gonna go for azure. Blur the horizon. Then I'm going to go for a semicolon, so I want to say a little bit more about these blues that fade into each other. So shades of azure blur the horizon. So that's my verb there. So that makes it a complete independent clause. And then on the other side of the semicolon, I have to write another clause that relates to it. So I'm going to put, I've already used blurred, I'm going to put it is hard to tell where water ends and the air begins. So let me just read back over it. So such a big part of this first paragraph is making sure it makes sense, making sure you've checked it. So tranquil, peaceful, calm. The only sound is the gentle splashing of waves as they reach the shore. Shades of azure blur the horizon. It is hard to tell where water ends and the air begins. Okay, I quite like that, and there's an interesting comment to be made here. Often students will say, it's obvious this paragraph is not finished. All I've described is the colour between the sand and the sky and what I can hear. I haven't talked about the sand, I haven't talked about the palm trees, I haven't really created enough of the image yet. Now, often students will say, how long should a paragraph be? And, you know, maybe the default answer is 5 sentences, but if you look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've written 5 sentences and I'm nowhere near through my paragraph, so that's kind of a warning regarding trying to figure out how many sentences should be in a paragraph. You'll know when a paragraph has enough detail in it and whether you've got enough down. So I'm going to move on next to the sand. I'm going to imagine it as a bit more white than it is there, although it does look quite white. It's kind of a pale yellow. What I think is that I'm going to use a simile here. I want to describe the sand as like crystal. So I'm thinking like grains of crystal, but then grains you would associate with sand. I'm going to start with the like of the simile. That's just a nice way to go in straight to the simile and then explain what you're describing. So like grains of crystal, granules of crystal. I could say shards of crystal, but shards to me it links to glass and then it makes me think it's sharp, which doesn't sound like something nice to walk on. So I'm going to go for pieces, like pieces of crystal coating the ground. Below the sand offers a silky walkway towards the gentle I've gone for gentle there, so I don't really want to go for gentle again. The refreshment of the cool waves. So I'm going to start to think now about, so I've covered kind of some of the things you can see, I can cover what you can hear. I want to think about the feeling now. So if you were to walk on that sand, it would probably be quite, I've said it's silky, so there's a sense of feeling there, but what I think it also would be is quite warm. If you've ever been on a beach in a hot country, sometimes the sand can be quite difficult to walk on. So I'm gonna maybe mention something to do with that now. So scorching, so instead of starting with the sun, I'm going to go in with some adjectives. So scorching and baking. I don't want to just say the sun. The amber September sun radiates across this paradise, forcing the grains of crystal sand to burn the feet, no, the toes of those who walk by. Okay, so now I've done a bit about the sand. What I'm going to talk about now is these palm trees. I want to personify them, really. What I'm thinking is that they offer kind of shade in quite an empty landscape. So it's almost like they're maybe like people reaching arms out to kind of like protect and shade others. So that's what I'm going to go for. Towering, I don't want to say tall, that's rubbish. Towering palm trees offer welcome shade from the burning sun. No, not sun, I'm going to go for rays. So I've gone for towering palm trees, but I haven't really personified that. I'm going to use them for arms as the leaves. They reach out their arms to offer shelter and protection. So towering palm trees offer welcome shade from the burning rays. They reach out their arms to offer, I've said offer twice, haven't I? Let's get rid of offer. So to shelter and protect anyone resting in, I've used paradise there, but I think it's okay to repeat it, this paradise. Okay, so let's just have a little look at the checklist at the top. So I think we're nearly at the end of the paragraph there. So I've got some detailed imagery. I've tried to cover different elements of the picture. I've covered sound, sight and feel, touch, so I think that's okay there. I don't really think there'd be anything to taste, and I think it probably would be a little bit clunky and silly to add it. I've got the I've definitely got simile comparing the water to sand. I've used some personification. I don't know if I've yet used quite a metaphor, but that's okay. I've tried to include some different colours, so I've used azure instead of blue. And then I've tried to do it as if they can't see the picture. I think I've created enough description there. So I just need a closing line, really. I think I might refer back to the tranquility of the opening and the kind of relax. So I've used tranquil, peaceful and calm. I might go back to relaxing. Now, it's quite hard to end this paragraph as an example paragraph because I don't know what I'm going on to next in my shift paragraph. So say my shift paragraph is going to describe this maybe later on at night when it's maybe a bit more dark and feels a bit more empty and a bit more sinister. Or maybe I'm going to describe it in a storm. I think that's probably what I'd go on to do. So let's just imagine that the shift paragraph is gonna shift to a storm brewing later on. I maybe want to end my paragraph with a hint of that. So I'm going to put tranquility. No, I've already done. Yeah, I've started with tranquility. I'm going to go back to it. So tranquility surrounds everything here, but it only takes a second for this paradise to become a living hell. So I've kind of given a bit of an option to shift there, away from this kind of tranquility, this peaceful, this heat and loveliness, into what's going to become quite a dark description of it as a storm. Okay, there we go. That's how you do a drop paragraph. That's some of the things you should be including, and there's an example there. Give it a go yourself, see how it goes, try and use these tips, try and make it nice and detailed. We're looking for a good paragraph. This does look quite long, but I've used quite big handwriting so that you're able to see. But that's the kind of level of description we're going to be looking for. Good luck, and see you next week for your shift paragraph.